Most people assume that intelligence makes life easier. If you're smart, you should be better at solving problems. You should make better decisions. You should see mistakes before they happen. So naturally, people assume that intelligent people must also be good at relationships. But strangely, the opposite often happens. Many highly intelligent people struggle with love, dating, and emotional connection in ways that surprise everyone around them. Friends look at them and think, how can someone so smart have such a hard time with relationships? The truth is that intelligence helps you solve many kinds of problems, but relationships are not one of them. And the reason is simple. Relationships are not a puzzle you solve once and finish. They are a constantly changing system of emotions, expectations, misunderstandings, and communication. And for a very analytical mind, that can be deeply frustrating. Let's start with the first problem. Smart people tend to overthink everything. When something small happens in a relationship, most people react emotionally and move on. But a highly analytical person often does something different. They analyze. They replay conversations in their head. They examine tone of voice. They question whether a word meant something deeper. They consider 10 possible interpretations of a single sentence. For example, imagine a partner says something simple like, "Are you okay?" To many people, this is just a normal question, but an analytical mind may immediately begin running simulations. Why did they ask that? Did I sound upset earlier? Did I say something wrong? Are they hinting at a bigger issue? Instead of responding naturally, the mind becomes a detective investigating hidden meaning, and sometimes the meaning was never there in the first place. Overthinking creates emotional distance because instead of feeling the relationship, the person is constantly analyzing it. It's like trying to enjoy music while studying the sound waves. Technically interesting, but the experience itself gets lost. Now let's move to the second challenge. Smart people often expect relationships to be logical. This seems reasonable at first. If two people care about each other, they should communicate clearly. Problems should be discussed calmly. Misunderstandings should be resolved through rational conversation. That sounds ideal, but real relationships rarely work like that. Human emotions are messy. People get defensive. People misinterpret things. People sometimes react based on feelings rather than logic. And when a highly logical person encounters this, they often become confused or frustrated. They might think, why are we arguing about this? The solution is obvious. But in relationships, being logically correct does not automatically solve the problem. Sometimes the other person is not looking for a solution, they're looking for understanding. And if someone responds to emotion purely with logic, it can make the other person feel unheard. For example, imagine someone says, "I feel like you haven't been paying attention to me lately." A logical response might be, "That's not accurate. We spent 3 hours together yesterday." From a factual standpoint, that may be true, but emotionally it misses the point. The other person wasn't presenting data, they were expressing a feeling. Smart people sometimes struggle here because their instinct is to solve the problem, not validate the emotion, and those are two very different things. Now let's look at the third issue. Intelligent people often have very high standards. When someone thinks deeply about life, they usually develop very specific ideas about compatibility, values, and long-term goals. They want meaningful conversations. They want intellectual stimulation. They want emotional depth. There is nothing wrong with that, but the side effect is that the pool of people who feel truly compatible may become smaller. While others may easily enter relationships, highly thoughtful individuals may spend long periods evaluating whether someone truly aligns with their values. They might ask themselves questions like, do we see the world the same way? Can we grow together intellectually? Will this relationship still make sense 10 years from now? Those questions are thoughtful, but they can also slow down the natural process of getting to know someone. Sometimes relationships grow through shared experience, not through perfect compatibility from the start. But analytical minds often want clarity before emotional investment, and love rarely provides that kind of certainty. There is also another problem that doesn't get discussed often. Intelligent people are very aware of potential future problems. When they look at a relationship, they don't only see the present moment, they see the future possibilities. They notice personality differences. They imagine how conflicts might develop. They anticipate long-term challenges. This ability to foresee potential problems is extremely useful in many areas of life, but in relationships it can sometimes create unnecessary hesitation. Before the relationship has even begun, the mind is already imagining how it might fail. That creates a strange situation. The relationship is not struggling because of something that actually happened. It's struggling because of something that might happen someday. Over time, this habit can make emotional vulnerability feel risky, and that leads to another important issue. Many intelligent people protect themselves emotionally by staying in control. They prefer to understand situations before committing to them. They prefer to analyze before acting. But love requires something that analysis cannot provide: uncertainty. When you care about someone, you cannot fully control the outcome. You cannot guarantee the relationship will work. You cannot predict every emotional reaction. For people who are comfortable navigating uncertainty, this feels natural. But for highly analytical individuals, it can feel like stepping into chaos. And so they hesitate. They wait until they feel certain. But relationships rarely offer certainty before they begin. They grow through trust, shared experience, and gradual emotional openness. Which brings us perhaps to the most important reason intelligent people sometimes struggle with relationships. They often spend so much time thinking about love that they forget to experience it. They analyze compatibility. They examine communication. They study patterns and behaviors. But love is not something that can be fully understood from the outside. It has to be lived. And when the mind is always observing the relationship like a scientist studying an experiment, it becomes harder to simply be present inside it. The irony is that the same intelligence that helps someone understand the world can sometimes make the emotional world feel more complicated than it actually is. But this is only half the story, because the deeper reasons intelligent people struggle with love are not just about overthinking, logic, or high standards. There is something even more subtle happening beneath all of that, something that affects how intelligent people connect, trust, and open up emotionally. And once you understand that part of the story, the entire picture of relationships begins to make much more sense. The deeper issue is something far more subtle. It has to do with how intelligent people experience connection itself. You see, intelligence often changes the way someone interacts with the world. Highly analytical people spend a lot of time inside their own thoughts. They observe patterns, they question assumptions, they think about ideas, systems, and possibilities. That internal world can become extremely rich, but it can also create a quiet distance between them and everyone else. Because most social interactions are not built around deep analysis or complex thinking. They're built around shared feelings, small talk, humor, and simple emotional exchanges. For many intelligent people, those interactions can feel unsatisfying. Not because they dislike people, but because their minds are often operating at a different level of abstraction. While others may enjoy casual conversation about everyday topics, analytical thinkers often crave deeper discussions about life, meaning, philosophy, ambitions, fears. And when those conversations don't happen very often, something strange can occur. They begin to feel emotionally alone even when surrounded by people. This loneliness is not always obvious from the outside. Someone might appear socially capable. They may have friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. They might even be charming or funny in conversation. But internally, they feel like very few people truly understand how their mind works. And that has consequences for relationships, because love, at its core, requires a sense of being understood. Not just liked, not just admired, but seen. When someone feels that their thoughts, emotions, and worldview are deeply understood by another person, trust grows naturally. But when that sense of understanding is rare, opening up emotionally can feel risky. Many intelligent people learn over time to keep parts of themselves hidden, not intentionally, but because explaining the complexity of their thoughts can feel exhausting. It's easier to simplify things, or to stay quiet, or to joke about things rather than reveal how deeply they actually think about them. And slowly, that habit becomes emotional armor. Now here's where things become even more complicated. Highly intelligent people are often very self-aware. They analyze their own behavior. They notice their own emotional reactions. They question their motives and insecurities. At first, that sounds like a healthy trait, and in many ways it is. Self-awareness helps people grow, but too much self-analysis can create a strange effect. Instead of simply experiencing emotions, the person begins observing their emotions while they happen. Imagine feeling attraction towards someone. Instead of simply enjoying that feeling, the analytical mind might start asking questions. Why do I like this person? Is this genuine compatibility or just temporary excitement? Am I projecting something onto them? The emotional experience becomes interrupted by analysis. It's like watching a movie while constantly pausing to steady each scene. You still see the story, but the emotional flow gets broken. Another factor that makes relationships challenging for intelligent people is expectation management. Because they think deeply about life, they often imagine ideal scenarios. They picture meaningful partnerships filled with intellectual chemistry, emotional depth, mutual growth, and shared purpose. Again, there's nothing wrong with wanting those things, but the danger is that the imagined relationship can become more perfect than any real relationship could ever be. Reality involves misunderstandings. Reality involves imperfect communication. Reality involves two different personalities learning how to adapt to each other over time. When expectations are extremely high, even a good relationship can start to feel disappointing. Not because something is wrong, but because it doesn't match the ideal version that existed in the mind. Then there is another psychological dynamic that plays a powerful role. Many intelligent people are used to being competent. In school, work, or intellectual environments, they often know how to succeed. They understand the rules of the system. They know how to improve their performance through effort and learning. Relationships are different. You can read books about communication. You can learn about psychology. But love does not operate like an exam you can study for. Sometimes misunderstandings happen even when both people have good intentions. Sometimes emotions become complicated even when no one did anything wrong. And for people who are used to mastering systems through intelligence, that unpredictability can feel frustrating. It feels like playing a game where the rules constantly change. So some intelligent people try to regain control in the only way they know how. They analyze more. They try to optimize conversations. They search for patterns in behavior. But the more they attempt to control the emotional environment, the less natural the relationship can feel. Ironically, the very skills that help them succeed in intellectual areas, analysis, planning, prediction, can interfere with the spontaneity that relationships need. Now here is the most important point. None of this means intelligent people are incapable of love. In fact, when they form deep connections, those relationships can be incredibly meaningful. Because once trust is established, intelligent individuals often bring extraordinary qualities to relationships. They are thoughtful. They are curious about their partner's inner world. They are capable of deep conversations and long-term commitment. They tend to reflect on their behavior and genuinely try to grow. But reaching that stage requires something difficult. It requires learning to turn down the volume of the analytical mind. Not completely, just enough to allow emotional experience to happen without constant evaluation. It requires accepting uncertainty, accepting imperfection, accepting that relationships are not engineering projects, they are living systems. They evolve through patience, vulnerability, and shared moments that cannot be predicted or optimized in advance. In other words, the key is not becoming less intelligent. The key is understanding that love operates on a different frequency than logic. Logic asks, does this make sense? Love often asks something much simpler. Does this feel real? And when someone learns to balance both those worlds, the thoughtful mind and the open heart, something powerful happens. The intelligence that once complicated relationships begins to enrich them. Because the smartest thing anyone can realize about love is this: understanding another human being is not a problem to solve. It is a journey you experience together.